So good morning again, everyone. My name is Reverend Alison Olson, and I serve the local Freiburg New Church here. And I am pleased to offer the first lecture of the day. Today is Tuesday, August 14th, here at the Freiburg New Church Assembly. And I have decided to title my lecture, David and the Ark, Intuiting 6 Steps. David and the Ark, Intuiting 6 Steps. And I decided that intuiting would be the perfect word. Intuiting, or to intuit something by definition, means to know or understand something because of a feeling that you have, rather than because of facts or what someone has told you. So to intuit something is to know or understand something because of a feeling that you have, rather than because of facts or what someone told you. And that felt like the perfect word for this morning. And I just want to share just briefly about why I chose that word, and it will play a part in this scripture. A few years ago, I had an experience where I was sitting at home and I was looking for books, so I'm sure I'm not alone in having ordered from Amazon, online, ordering a book. And if you've ever done so, you know that once you order one book, lots of suggested reading comes up. And I was scrolling through, browsing the suggested reading, and this book popped up. There's a book about spirituality. I had no idea who the author was. I'd never heard of this book, never heard of the title, never seen it. My mind knew nothing about this book. But everything inside my body was saying, yes, 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 order this book. And I'm sure you know, you've probably had experiences with what I'm going to call your intuition that way. There's just a deep knowing inside. There's certain moments we have in life, you just know, and your very being is telling you yes. Or maybe it's your very being is telling you no for something. It could be what path to take in life. It could be a time when you met someone you would marry. It could be a career or a job. For me, this was a moment I was just looking at a book. Didn't know anything about it, but everything inside of me, and particularly in my stomach, was saying yes, and I felt such joy. And I just knew I was supposed to order this book. And I share that because it so intrigued me that my mind could have no understanding, no recollection, no knowledge of this book, but that my body was telling me, yes, this is for me. This was part of my path. I should read this book. And it intrigued me, and instead of leaving it as an experience that I had that once upon a time, and I could say, well, that was interesting, I realized that I could call upon that kind of experience again. That when I'm really still, I can feel it really in my stomach area. If you're like even the phrase like a gut feeling about something. I feel it in my core, I feel it in my stomach, and if I'm really still, if I'm supposed to do something, or if it's a yes to a question that I have, I feel it. I feel it, and I use it all the time. I use it when I'm driving home from the store and I'm wondering if I should turn left now or if I should go straight. I say it in my mind, left or straight until I get a yes in my feet, in my body. Okay, this is the path I should take. And so I mention that because, well, first of all, I never knew before that our physical bodies could be such helpers in our role, our ability to connect to spirit, to connect to the spiritual realms. For me personally, I didn't realize that, and I use that all the time. And I also mention that because I relied on that for today and for our topic, and I had asked my question in my own prayer and meditation time, well, what might be useful today? We're thinking about journeys. Suzanne reminded us yesterday there's lots of ways to look at journeys. We could take stories of people in the Bible as a journey. There's different churches, history of churches. The Swedenborg would lay them out. We could look at that as a journey. So my question for this morning was, what could we look at that may be helpful may be of service to us that is a part of the journey. And where my intuition led me was this story where David, as king, wants to bring the ark to Jerusalem. Now, what has happened in this, and I just want to share this briefly, what has happened is that, of course, the ark is holding the Ten Commandments. It's a sacred wooden chest that was overlaid with gold. It for the Israelites was the presence of God. Moses had instructions on how to build this chest. Other verses in the Bible, I believe it's in Hebrew, tell us that there was also a jar of manna in the ark and Aaron's rod. This is sacred stuff. And the Israelites, over time, they would take it with them wherever they would go. If they were going to go into a battle, the story with Jericho, they used that ark to walk around the city with them. They consulted it as far as what they should do. And over time, there came a point where, when Saul was king, so he was a little bit less patient with the process. He didn't consult the ark. And there came a point where the Philistines captured this ark. So this was terrible news. But it turned out the Philistines had the ark for 7 months, and they said, we're giving it back. Because they were experiencing nothing but misfortune with the ark in their possession. So now the ark has been in somebody's home. David wants to bring it to Jerusalem. But what happens is they're using an oxen, they're using a cart. And what happens is they reach a point where the oxen stumble. And there's a gentleman named Uzzah. I don't know how else to pronounce his name. In that moment that he sees the oxen stumble, he reaches out to touch, to make sure that the ark is not going to fall. And in that moment, he dies because he has done this thing. There's fear all about this, and there's anger. David says he's angry, he's fearful. Why have you done this? They want to bring this sacred object with them on this journey, and they're trying to bring it to Jerusalem. And this terrible thing has happened, so they kind of park it in somebody's house. And that's where we picked up in our story. It was there for 3 months. And they hear that this family that is holding this ark and taking care of it has received nothing but blessings. So they're going to go and pick this ark back up. And they're going to try again. And I was curious because as I was reading this, and I thought, isn't that interesting that there are steps in these verses I felt led to. They were talking about journey, and here are these steps. So if you can imagine, so there's rejoicing because they're going to go bring the ark back, but there's a moment where before all of the rejoicing is happening, before they make an offering, before David is dancing, he's watching them take 6 steps with the ark. And after they take 6 steps, then they make the offering, then there's dancing, and it's kind of like a completion. So my thought was, what would this represent? How does this speak to us about our journey? And when I went back and just reviewing a little bit about how Emanuel Swedenborg was writing about the ark, he said in several places, the ark is heaven. The ark is the inmost heaven, or the ark is heaven where the Lord is. So here is the ark. They're wanting to bring it with them on this journey. And the ark is heaven, if we think about it that way. And I couldn't help but recall Jesus also saying, the kingdom of heaven is within you. One of the things I've always loved about our tradition and our the theology is the idea that the different things, the different people, the different places, the different objects can all represent and be part of our own spiritual journey. So we can look at this and we can say, okay, all of this could be inside of me on this spiritual journey. And so as I was thinking about this, and I'm hoping this will make sense, as I was thinking about how do I put this into words, is what if part of the journey is being able to embrace the heaven that's inside of us? What if part of the journey is when Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is within you, how does that feel to you? And can you believe that? And can you trust that? Can we trust that we have heaven within us? Now, Jesus didn't say, you will have the kingdom of heaven within you when you do X, Y, and Z. Jesus says you have, the kingdom of heaven is within you. And can you believe that now? So sometimes part of the journey is about humility. Reverend Susanna spoke about that on Sunday. And sometimes we recognize and we're trying to make a journey from feeling, sometimes we're thinking about maybe we're in a selfish place and we're trying to move into a less selfish place. This to me felt like part of the journey where we're really trying to believe in our goodness. Can we believe that? And can you believe that you have heaven inside of you? And can you trust yourself? Do you trust yourself? And as I was thinking about those questions, I thought, well, maybe these 6 steps, maybe there are 6 steps to coming to this place. We get to fully celebrate and believe and live it, that we are connected with heaven, that it doesn't have to be disconnected from us. It can feel safe in our presence and in our care. So the 6 steps, I thought, okay, what is that? So again, I was just trying to tune into my intuition, my sense of this, and you can see if this speaks to you, if this resonates with you. Where I felt led was, for the first step, is 1 Samuel 17:38, and I'll just write that verse up here. 1 Samuel 17:38. Now this is where David, younger David, is about to go out and meet Goliath. So I'm sure for many of you this will be familiar. He says he can do it. He says he can defeat Goliath. Saul's, is hoping the best for him, but is worried for him. And it says here that Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. And David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around because he was not used to them. I cannot go in these, he said. I cannot go in these. So here we're thinking about steps, and I thought how beautiful that here, where I felt led and what I wanted to share with you is about someone who's having trouble walking. And the way to not have trouble walking is to give back what Saul had tried to give him and what he had put on. And I thought, isn't that interesting? So we have something, a helmet covering the head, you're covering the tunic, the coat of armor is covering the heart, the core. I thought, how, maybe in this journey to believing in ourselves, finding heaven in ourselves, believing in that, maybe one of the first steps is letting go of what we may have put on, sometimes from others. That maybe there's a part in here that speaks to believing in our own abilities and trusting in what the gifts we've been given. Mm-hmm. And I thought, how, David, it's so beautiful for him. He walks around and he says, I can't go in these. And it probably took mere minutes for him to realize, I can't do this. I can't wear this. For us, how long might we carry around and put on maybe other people's ideas of what our life should look like? Maybe what we should believe, what we should love. And to me, this really speaks to valuing and coming to find and value our authenticity and our uniqueness and the gifts that we've been given. And loving ourselves begins with choosing to have some trust in our abilities. That we can't find ourselves when we choose to accept others' ideas of what we need. And so my first thought was maybe just as a practical thing, thinking about really finding that heaven again within. If we feel maybe we've lost that somehow, or we don't trust that that's with us, is to really be able to just take a look for a minute at our own talents and our own gifts and abilities. David knew, I can go pick up those 5 smooth stones. I know what I have, and I don't need these things. And he can walk, and then he can walk. So I thought, okay, maybe part of this gift finding the heaven is begins with valuing our gifts. So I'm just using my intuition. I feel led, the second step, I feel led to Genesis 8. So this is when Noah is coming off the ark. This is when the flood has receded. God says to Noah, come out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons and their wives. Bring out every kind of living creature that is within you. The birds, the animals, all the creatures that move along the ground, so they can multiply on the earth and be fruitful and increase in number. So Noah came out. I might be preparing today. Noah came out together with his sons and his wife and his sons' wives and all the animals and all the creatures. Everything that moves on land came out of the ark, one kind after another. So that, okay, this kind of walking image is continuing. We know this for Swedenborg wasn't a literally true story, but when you imagine it, what that might have looked like, when you could think of it. All the creatures and Noah and his family and everybody departing and beginning to that walk again. And when Swedenborg was writing about the ark, one of the things, of course, you wanted to be on the ark. This was the saving vessel. You would have wanted to be on the ark. But one of the things he writes about that period in terms of our own spirituality and what we might be feeling, he says as long as he remained in the ark, it was a kind of imprisonment. And that actually coming out of the ark, that was freedom. So maybe the second step is being able to value freedom in a new way. So I'll just put this. This was Genesis 8. Sometimes what does it feel like if we give ourselves freedom? Like freedom to, I don't know, what could we do with our life? Where could we go? Where could our mind take us? What could we explore? And I relate that because I spent some time in meditation with this, and I felt like I received a message about this. And this was, I felt like was what I was receiving. That this verse relates to this next step of the journey because I felt like it was coming from the angels. We, beings of light, see how you hold yourselves in tight spaces. This was the message I was getting in meditation about this passage. We see how you hold yourself in tight spaces. Sometimes you only allow yourself so much room to wonder, to believe, and explore. And sometimes humans can make their lives too small. And it's time for freedom for your spirit. I felt like that was the message, at least speaking to me. That part of finding heaven again, believing in our goodness, believing that that's there, that we are created in God's image. The kingdom of heaven really is within us. It begins with valuing our gifts and being open to explore, being open to something new. And maybe the practical application, and if you're someone who likes affirmations, for instance, maybe you just add this to your morning prayer time or your spiritual life, however that looks, is I am open to learning something new. I'm open to receiving new information. I'm open to something new opening up in my life. The third place my intuition took me was a place in Ezekiel. So the next part of the journey, as it was making sense to me, this is Ezekiel 43. In this part, Ezekiel is receiving this beautiful vision from God about this temple. And it says here in this part of Scripture, it says, the glory of the Lord entered the temple. The Spirit lifted me up and brought me into the inner court, and the glory of the Lord filled the temple. While the man was standing beside me, I heard someone speaking to me from inside the temple. He said, "Son of man, this is the place of my throne and the place for the soles of my feet. This is where I will live among the Israelites forever." And again, I'm just kind of marveling at how steps, feet are playing a part of this journey theme. So we start out with, where do we have trouble, how do we have trouble walking? We begin to walk and we begin to explore. And here we come to an inner place. This is where God's feet are. It says the soles of my feet. This is the place for the soles of my feet. This is where I will live among the Israelites forever. And for me, what this was speaking to is, so different parts of Scripture certainly give this reference, is that the temple doesn't have to be the outer thing. It doesn't have to be the outer temple, but the temple is within. Some speak of your body as the temple. And where this led me is that part of the journey of knowing again, of finding heaven, believing in ourselves, beginning to see and trust that we have goodness because we are part of God, is coming to know God inside of us. And what I felt like this is the message with this is that the step in the journey to knowing this is really coming to a place where you are listening to your inner voice. And you're listening to the Spirit speaking within you. And that it helps us find God when we feel like the love is lacking. The journey asks for us to listen to the inner voice. And I would say maybe the practical application here is just spending time in meditation. That we might hear that voice and feel that presence inside of us. So we're going to move on to step 4. I said, okay, here we go. We're coming along. Where are we headed next? And I felt led to Luke chapter 1. And if that rings a bell with you, you might know that this is when the birth of Jesus is foretold. And so just think about this for a moment. This is, we're opening ourselves up to freedom. We're opening ourselves up to new ideas. If we can spend time in meditation, be open to the presence of God being within us and finding that heaven, here we find Mary being spoken to. An angel went to her and said, "Greetings, you who are highly favored. The Lord is with you." So it's receiving that message. The next step is receiving that message. You, the same as Mary. Greetings, you are highly favored. The Lord is with you. The Lord is with you. And then, a few verses later, we read or hear this. At that time, Mary got ready and hurried to a town in the hill country of Judea, where she entered Zechariah's home and greeted Elizabeth. And I thought, how beautiful as an idea here and a process that when we take the time to, this feels like the first portion is really being okay with nonconformity at times. Being okay with your uniqueness. Being okay with who you are and really finding your authentic self. And that it leads us to a quiet place within. But the next part of that, at least as I felt like it was showing itself to me, is that it takes us back into community. Mary is running, and she's meeting Elizabeth with this new news. Something new, amazing, and she's been spoken to, and she hears it, and it leads her back into community. And I thought that was just a beautiful way to think about that. And I would just bring up something I'd read lately. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the work of Brené Brown. She's a researcher. She has written quite a few books on vulnerability, courage. She's done a TED Talk, which was, I think, fairly well known. She, for a time, maybe called herself a vulnerability researcher. So she wrote a book recently called Braving the Wilderness. And it was her findings when she was meeting people. She was really trying to figure out this disconnect that we're feeling in society, this disconnect from one another. And part of what she found is those people who felt the most connection with those around them were the most able, and she uses this phrase, to belong to themselves. Those who are able to belong to themselves. They were really could value their own authentic, unique life as it was and is, and to be able to stand in that place allowed them to be able to meet other people where they were. Because there was no worry that somehow I'm not going to fit in with your beliefs. It was really a valuing and seeing it as a sacred thing. That sometimes we stand on our own, sometimes we feel alone and we can feel vulnerable, and sometimes we find that we are in a sense of belonging with other people. But what she was saying is that those who felt the most connection, which is for her, and absolutely what we need in our world is this connection with one another, were those who are able to most strongly belong to themselves. So I feel like this was my interpretation of this was taking kind of had there's some of those same qualities where it was really a belonging to yourself, but that brings us back into community, and it brings us back and wanting to share with one another. And I felt like the message I kind of received with that is be ready to travel. That connecting with Spirit will take you to new places, and you will want to share your joy. Be ready to travel. Connecting with Spirit will take you to new places, and you will want to share your joy. Where do we head after that? I found myself in Luke 7. Okay, so this was Mary. And in Luke 7, there's a portion where people are really wondering who Jesus is. And it says here, at that time Jesus cured many who had diseases, sicknesses, and evil spirits, and gave sight to many who were blind. So he replied to the messengers, "Go back and report to John what you have seen and heard. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor. Blessed is anyone who does not stumble on account of me." So the part that really caught my eye is the lame walk, because I'm still thinking about this journey. I'm thinking about taking steps and walking and running even with Mary. And here we have Jesus showing us some of his healing experiences and qualities. But what I felt was that as we come along this path, if this was a path that spoke to you, as we come along it, that this is a great healing can take place. And that for all the times in our life where we felt like, I don't know who I am, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know how to make decisions, I don't know, I have all these questions and I feel like maybe I'm stumbling through life, that maybe this would be a path that would help bring healing to that. And that we would have more clarity on our path. The more connected we are with that heaven within, the more clarity we have about who we are, the love that we bring, and the love that we're able to bring. So finally, the last step that I came to, I found myself in the book of Job. Book of Job, written, some believe, 6th century BCE. And I'm sure many here are familiar with that. Job had a hard time of it. He was this, we might say, a righteous man. He followed. He did what he felt what he was called to do. He didn't err. He didn't feel like he had participated in any kind of wickedness in any way. But all these things are happening to him. And of course that was preceded by a conversation between Satan and God. And Satan saying, well, I bet if things, if life isn't so good for Job, you just might find he's not so faithful. And throughout the book, Job is having conversations with his friends. And it's really kind of countering a belief that if hard things happen, if really terrible things have happened, it must be because I deserve it. It must be because I did something wrong. And what this book does beautifully is say that's not the answer. That's not the reason. And Job is completely, throughout the book, saying, I didn't do anything wrong. His friends keep saying, I'm sure you know you did something to deserve all this. And in this part in 31, he's saying, this is sort of his last monologue with his friends. He says, for what is our lot from God above, our heritage from the Almighty on high? Does he not see my ways and count my every step? If I have walked with falsehood or my foot has hurried after deceit, let God weigh me in honest scales, and he will know that I am blameless. If my steps have turned from the path, if my heart has been led by my eyes, if my hands have been defiled, then may others eat what I have sown, and may my crops be uprooted. So he's continuing in this portion. He's, for maybe lack of other better words, he's defending his goodness. He's defending that. He believes in that. And I thought that is a perfect place to come to a conclusion in terms of coming to a place where we can really believe that. It's not that the journey is finished. It's not that we don't want to continue to evolve and grow as a spirit. But we can do that while also believing that we are part of love. God made us. There is perfection in everyone's life here. If we can't, I almost think like I can't even fathom what it took. Everything that had to happen for each one of us to be here. Just to be living. What had to happen for everybody here who was born in different places, different times to be gathered in this room, in this moment. Could we even fathom that? There's such perfection. We know there is so much more to travel this road. There's ways we want to grow and evolve and love in this world. We want to see the world be a different place. But just to stop and acknowledge the perfection that already exists, and that the kingdom of heaven is within, and that goodness, it's there. It's there, and maybe if you have ever felt like, I don't know if I can trust that, maybe this speaks to you. So that ends this part of my lecture. I would love to hear if anybody has any thoughts, comments, questions, however this may have struck you. I would certainly welcome any conversation.
I just think part of what I got out of what you were saying is that there's a real feeling of walking in the flow of providence, and just letting providence direct you, but being open to it, being willing to change, even though change might not be nice, but just know that that's to be open to the Lord's path.
Yeah. Thank you, Debbie.
I have two comments. One is about the David and Saul and the armor. Saul was a really big guy. One of the reasons that people liked Saul is because he was so big. He was head and shoulders above the rest of the crowd, so his armor wouldn't have fit David. It would just been way too big. And for him to walk around in this armor that was so big for him would have been, it would have been heavy in the first place, more heavy than he could carry. And it wouldn't be comfortable. He couldn't. He literally probably could not walk in it.
Yes.
He probably could tell from looking at it that he couldn't wear it, but since Saul was the boss, he had to do what he said. So that's just an interesting thing. Another thing is what you're talking about intuition at the beginning, that you could feel which way to go, left or straight, left or straight, left or straight. I don't have that. I don't have that. And exactly. And that's what I'm going to say next. And most men don't have that. It's something that, from my lifelong study of gender differences, that women have this kind of intuition from the heart that are able to internally connect little tidbits of information without what we men call thinking about it. Mm-hmm. That my gender doesn't have that ability. Some of us have a small amount of it, but in general, we have to think about and connect facts in our head to come up with, should we go left or straight.
Well, I appreciate your comments, and I'm sure there's, I don't even know, what sort of scientific studies have been done on gender and intuition, but like when I'm just thinking about what I offered and what you said, I would say maybe, and I offer this with love, like a challenge for you, is to the tight space, like coming out of the ark, of believing that it's not possible for your gender to have and experience intuition. To just be open to that, like letting that go, that idea, because I think we really create our reality with our thoughts, and it's more powerful than we know and believe sometimes. Our thoughts creating our reality. So I would say with love, maybe if that's something that you want, that you could just be, that's what you could be open to. Like I allow that to go. I'm open to letting that idea that I can't have that because I'm a man. I allow that to leave. I don't know, maybe that didn't make sense.
I appreciated the first three. It seemed like those were all of one, where you finally say, I want to be myself. I want to step out and be my own human. And it's scary. You're in this place of freedom, but what am I going to be? And so you're stepping away, like in a spiral, away from community and meditating. But the meditation brings you back to, I'm going to be of use to all the others. It's a beautiful cycle. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Maybe the fact that the men who reached out to save the ark, maybe that's an inner fear that he wanted to save the ark, but for some reason it made him die. Maybe that has something to do with what he was talking about with the men. I don't know. But why? That's the only curious part to me. Why, when he was trying to do something, as Job was doing good things, why would he physically die when he touched the ark?
Well, there's a couple, just in reading about that a little bit, because it doesn't seem fair. It doesn't seem fair to have this impulse, like, I just want to make sure this thing doesn't fall, take that literally, that's harsh. What Scripture says is that, first of all, there were several sort of wrong things going on in that moment in terms of what the instructions were. First of all, the ark was never to be carried along on a cart. It was actually supposed to be carried by people. So there was a way in which they weren't following the instructions. And there's an idea here that in that moment, what that was signifying, you could say more of maybe a deeper level or a spiritual state or something we might experience, is in that moment, by reaching out to correct that, there was a lack of trust that God's got everything handled. There was a lack of trust that I don't need to save this ark. This ark is so powerful, has done so many powerful things, and for me to think that I needed to reach out and save that was where it felt false, like that was not
Thank you.
an accurate.
The ego was.
Is that's the ego? Yes, absolutely. Right. I think Dave.
I think relying on our own intuition is dangerous, and I believe relying on feelings from within, asking God at every moment to guide them, because there are so many people that get in trouble relying on gut feelings to do something. Starting with buying things online, but and going down to the worst kinds of things. So I say that's dangerous without the Lord's guidance. And I try, I don't always succeed, but I try every moment to ask God's guidance for my intuition. Even when I'm driving, Trevor, I think that can help your intuition if you ask God's help. And maybe women traditionally with being in more touch with their feelings than traditionally men are, though that's not always 100% the same. Old-fashioned men perhaps need more help with their intuition, but asking the Lord's help is necessary, I believe.
I'm sort of trying to figure out, one of the things that you said with this Renee Brown was belonging to yourself. And I guess, I have my own thoughts about it, which I'll share, and then maybe you can kind of say what you mean by that. When I think of that, with what you were saying comes from it, that we're sort of more available to be there for other people kind of thing, I think more of not what I would say belonging to yourself, but putting yourself out of the way so that you can just, sort of feel okay about yourself, and then that makes you more available for other people. But I wasn't sure kind of where that goes with what this gal was thinking of it.
I'm just trying to make sure I understand the question. I referenced Brene Brown's book and the phrase that she sort of took on, which is just belonging to yourself, which just meant for her that you were in touch with who you were, where you were at on your journey, what your beliefs are, but in so doing, knowing who you were, that allows a person to, for her, this is what she was just finding in her research, and I'm probably, really shouldn't be speaking to this. I mean, it's her research. What she was trying to say was that she felt that the people who felt most in touch with who they are were able to, as you say, put themselves aside in those moments so that they might connect with other people, and that it kind of brings about a feeling of, not worrying about fitting in. I mean, not worrying about feeling like we have other people's approval. Sometimes that's big for some of us in life, being able to let that go. And when we can do so, then there's a way in which we can connect with people in a heartfelt way that we may not have been able to if we were still wondering about our own identity and wanting to fit in and belong with the people, and the people who might have even, different perspectives than us. That it's a way to meet people where they are and be willing to encounter those who have different beliefs than ourselves.
It was just an unusual way to phrase it.
Yeah, it is, and it
belonging
doesn't.
to yourself.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Well, as you sort of went forward with it, it's like, okay, I would phrase it differently.
Mhm.
Sort of being okay with who you are.
Yeah.
So that you can be free to
Right.
connect with other people.
Right.
When you first read that Bible passage from Samuel. I thought you were going to talk about David dancing and singing at the end and leading the parade of, you know. And I just want to put a shout out for David. Ends up singing
Yeah,
and dancing.
joyful.
And
It was-
once you're done with all these steps. But thank you
Yeah.
for doing a little intro to
Yeah.
that. But let's remember to dance.
That's right. Thank you, Dean. That may be the perfect way to end. Dance out of here. Thank you.
Thank you.